Give it a shake. Come down here, spray our peppers. Look how beautiful those things are. Yes, indeed. Marigolds, they get a little bit too. We can come down, we can spray our peanuts. Got some navy beans right here coming in. Spray them as well. Just basically trying to show you that you can spray this on pretty much everything. Come over here to our squash cage. Give it a good coating. Every leaf. And we're going to be doing some pruning as well, because we got to keep that air circulation going. Also, we've already did our hand pollination, so we don't have to worry about that pollen getting gummed up. Like I say, you see that nice little shine on it, that little gloss. We want it everywhere on there. So some things that we're going to be needing here is going to be our cheesecloth. We're going to need a container to mix our lactic acid bacteria. Some distilled water. You cannot use tap water. It has to be distilled water. If you use your tap water, that's going to kill the culture. It's designed to take the bacteria out of the water. And of course, finally and last, it's going to be our lactic acid bacteria. And this is our spoiled milk. And now, I've heard many say that there is no lactic acid bacteria in pasteurized milk. Yes and no. When you pasteurize the milk, that is not a scientific laboratory extraction. So we're talking about an industry standard to where, yes, it removes up 99.9999% of the bacteria when it's pasteurized, but what we are looking for are the most dominant strains of our lactic acid bacteria, and they will survive through that heat process. They're mesophilic. You can see our liquid whey right here in the middle. That's what we're extracting. When you allow this to spoil in the refrigerator, it's a totally different process. You're going to get a different type of bacteria that's going to cause spoilage. But what we're here doing is we're lowering the pH by allowing this to sit out on the counter at 75 to 85 degrees. You might want to sit it in your garage or anywhere, but you want that 75 to 85 degrees, because what's that going to do? You're going to wake up those dominant strains of the lactic acid bacteria. Even that little point percentage that's still left over from pasteurization, you're going to have the most dominant lactic acid bacteria left over. That's what we want to culture out of this. And one of the ways that we know that lactic acid bacteria is working is because we're going to drop the pH. So the goal of the day is to prevent powdery mildew. Not to stop powdery mildew, but to prevent it. There's no powdery mildew anywhere around my garden, and that is because I am proactive with this process. And you can spray this 50-50 ratio. Now, I'm gonna go back to this again, because one of the main questions that I get oftentimes is, well, lactic acid bacteria is too strong to spray at a 50-50 ratio. The truth to that is, if we're doing lactic acid bacteria as in the lactic acid serum, which I use to make my fish hydrolysis, I will 100% agree with that. But these are two totally different processes. The one we use with our lactic acid serum, we take rice water, we'll mix in the rice water into the milk, and that actually drops the pH and causes a different strain of the lactic acid bacteria. The bacteria that we're using here is the dominance from the leftover strains that are left over after pasteurization. So there's no such thing as 100% pure milk or 100% pasteurized. There's a percentage that's left over, and the dominant strains that are left over in that, that's what we're culturing out of here. And one of the other truths that we're going to be having on this is, we've always been told not to spray our plants in the heat of the sun. But one of the things that we have to take into consideration is this is activated. The lactoferrins in this is activated by the UV rays. So we want to spray this on our plants right as the sun is starting to come out. And as it starts to dry, it activates that lactic acid bacteria. You want to exclude powdery mildew? This is the way to do it. The WHEY, W-H-E-Y, the way to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our cheesecloth here. We're going to just drape that across our container here, because what's going to happen is all that little cheesy stuff that's left over, and that's the solids from the milk, that's going to be strained out. That's what we want to do. SOS, and I call this my SOS protocol. You want to smell, observe, and substantiate. The first thing we're doing is we're smelling that. This does not smell putrid. It does not smell like a rotted smell. We're going to observe. There is our liquid whey right there. So we're observing that. We know that's happened. The last thing we're going to do to substantiate is going to be test the pH. If that pH has dropped, then we know that lactic acid bacteria is the dominant. You want to hold that cheesecloth so it doesn't fall into it. The last little drops. Now, see what's left over there? That's the fats or the solids from the milk. We're just going to slide it over a little bit. Let it continue to strain out. All right. So this is our liquid whey that we talk about. Now you see how beautiful that liquid is? I don't know, I guess you might call that a lemonade-y type look, but that is what we're looking for. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and test the pH. Add some distilled water to our clean mason jar here, and this is what we're going to just be rinsing off. Our probe in between our mixes should read somewhere around a neutral point of 7 with our distilled water. So we'll come down, and you can see just from the ambient temperatures, it's 81 degrees out, 60 that the probe is reading right now. It needs to be somewhere. You see it's going to continue to drop, but our goal, yep, there you go. You see it's finally kicking in. Yeah. And then we'll go over here. Come and get this to our liquid whey. And let's see, we're gonna see if we can get this. And as you can see right here, we're at a 4.8. So that tells us that those lactic acid bacteria are definitely dominant. This will last in the fridge probably for the course of the season, 3 to 4 months, but then we'll make a quick batch of this, but we'll be spraying this on the garden today. So our pH on that right now is a 4.8. We want to always rinse that probe off in between usage. And again, this is distilled water, so even just a slight touch of this, the lactic acid bacteria in there contaminates this distilled water, and it'll change the pH on it. We're going to take that, and we want to go up to about this line right here. It doesn't have to be a science, but we want to keep this at least 50-50. So we got half here, so we're going to try to get somewhere up to this with our distilled water. All right. And then we're going to run that through our cheesecloth once again before we add it to our sprayer, because we don't want to clog up our sprayer. Put our funnel in there, and we're going to tuck this in. And the beautiful part about using distilled water is the distilled water is going to take on the characteristics of whatever you add to it, because there are no contaminants in it. So when we measure our pH, After adding our lactic acid bacteria to our distilled water, it's going to almost match it. Strain it one more time. We're not trying to be all super neat here. We're just trying to get the job done. We don't want our sprayer getting clogged up. You see, even after we've strained it, you still have those solids still being captured by the cheesecloth. Look at that. You can really see it now as that water starts to settle. So our milk, before it spoils, is going to be anywhere from a 6.5 to a 6.7 pH. Once it goes through the transformation and that lactic acid bacteria drops that pH, we go from that 6.5 to 6.7 down to a 4.8 all the way down to maybe a 4.3. Anywhere in that range is going to be perfectly fine. So we'll come back right here. We'll rinse our probe off again. Again, once we start moving from solution to solution, we contaminate our distilled water, and our distilled water is going to take on whatever contaminants are added to it. So it'll change the pH of that distilled water just that easy. So we go down here and we're at a 4.8. So now the reason why I'm showing you guys this is I want you to understand that conventional thinking would have you say, because it's been pasteurized, that you'll no longer have the lactic acid bacteria prevalent in your pasteurized milk. And I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely incorrect. And when we sit that out on the countertop between that 75 and 85 degrees, it wakes those dominant strains of that lactic acid bacteria up. And that is what we want to culture. Now, if we leave this in the refrigerator, those bacteria that we're looking for, that lactic acid bacteria, they're going to stay asleep. And that's what that's designed to do. But then you have bacteria called Pseudomonas. And that is what dominates spoiled milk in the refrigerator. Two totally different beasts. Put our sprayer top back on. Give it a couple of pumps. And then we'll adjust our sprayer. And everybody says do not spray your plant as the sun starts to come up, but this is the opposite we're doing with our lactic acid bacteria and our liquid whey to prevent powdery mildew. Because our lactic acid bacteria, once those lactoferrins that are in this liquid whey is exposed to the UV light, that's what triggers it, and it activates those bacteria to colonize those leaves. So you're going to get a mild probiotic that's going into your plant. So it's going to boost the plant up. You're going to see some green come into it, and it's going to actually make the plant look a whole lot better, while at the same time colonizing the leaves, keeping those spores from landing that causes the powdery mildew, the downy mildew. Selective exclusion, the one that has the most, that's the one that's going to win the battle. And that's what we're doing right here. We're colonizing with our lactic acid bacteria and lactoferrins. And they're going to colonize the leaves on here, preventing any other mildews or spores from landing.